Hello, this is Todd Frazee, and this video is to follow the process for development of orthographic views from a model procedure that is posted on Canvas. So we're going to go step by step if you want to print it off. So step one is to start AutoCAD and open the drawing to extract, which is we're going to use the counter bearing bracket model as our example. And make sure you're starting off in the model space. And you want to ensure that you start off in world coordinate systems. When you view your model, be sure that the profile you represent that represents the front view is parallel to the plane formed by X and Z when we're in world coordinate systems. If you have to, rotate your model so that it is orientated similar. Placement of the origin is not critical for this, but the orientation of it is. Okay, and now we're going to set our current working layer as the profile visible lines. And that way everything we make currently is going to be in that layer. And then we're going to go back to the layers and we're going to freeze the pictorial view dimensions. Okay, so we're not accidentally creating anything on there. Okay, now we're going to set our view as front. So we go to where it says unsaved views and we're going to select front. Now we noticed a glitch or bug in one of the drop-in meetings, and that is even if you have your view set up to project perpendicular to your view, if you are in perspective, one of the views won't generate correctly. So you go over to this arrow here and just make sure that you're in parallel mode and not perspective view. And it should say that here. Your view cube may say something else. Now we're going to use the flat shot command. So flat shot. Type that in, and a dialog box for flat shot shows up. And what this is going to do is it's going to take the profile edges and create a flat representation of it. We're going to leave these top things at all default, everything above this line. We're not exporting to another file. We do need to change some parameters. This defaults to by block. We want to do it by layer. We want to make sure the line type is continuous, and this is for foreground lines. Then on obscured lines, we want to show them, and we want those also to be by layer, colored by layer, and we want them to be hidden lines. We don't want them to be continuous lines. That way they'll show up and it'll be obvious what in that view is obscured or a hidden line. Now some drafting styles will include the tangent edges of all your fillets. Some places don't because it makes it more ambiguous where the dimensions are pointing. But if you wanted the tangency points to show up, you would select this include tangential edges box. We aren't going to do that, and we're going to hit create. And you should see a view similar to this. And placement wise, we want to put it far away from the model because we're going to be using the model for our isometric view, and we don't want these views we're creating cluttering it. Now if you move the mouse right now, it's going to change the scale of the view, but a dialog box shows up, and we're just going to go scale it by 1. So make sure it says 1, and then we're going to use the same scale factor or 1 for the other axis. So it's asking, what do you want in X and Y? And then it's going to ask, do you want to rotate this? And if it doesn't say 0, type in 0 and hit enter. And there we've generated our front view. Okay. We're going to follow these same steps 2 more times to do the top view and right side view. So let's change our UCS to top, which puts us on step number 12 in the written procedure. You're now looking at the top view of our model. And we are going to type in flat shot again. Okay. Leave everything at the settings we used for the last one. Hit create. And again, we want to place this a good distance away so that from an isometric view, we wouldn't see this view on edge like that we see that one there on our layout. Okay, and then we're going to scale it 1, 1, and 0 for rotation. And there is our top view. All right, so that takes us to step number 16, where we change our view to right side. And we're going to do a flat shot. Oops. Okay, leaving all the settings the same. Hit create. We're going to zoom out. Let's throw this view, let's say there. Scale factor 1. Scale factor 1. And rotation of 0. Okay, we've now completed all the steps. Generate our 3 conventional views for our layout. Now at this point we're going to freeze the model. So go back to layers and we're going to freeze the model layer, and it's going to disappear from view, and that's okay because right now we don't want to accidentally change the model. We want that to be stable, and we have our 3 views that we're going to need in our layout. Alright, big warning, make sure you don't skip that step. Now we'll turn the model back on later towards the end. Okay, now that completes the flat shots, so we're at step 22, and next we must size the viewports to the specific display scale and align the orthographic views to each other. So we're going to go to step 23, and we're going to use ASME B-size sheet on most of our projects in this class. And we see some information here in the viewports. So the first thing we do is we go to each viewport individually and click. We're going to double click in the viewport, and that'll activate it. And we're going to type zoom. Okay, and it's going to give you a bunch of options, and we're going to use extents. Okay, and so that zooms that viewport to its maximum extent. So we can see that what we want is a top view towards the top of that frame. The 2 lines you see on either side are actually your other views, and that's why you want to draw them far apart. So let's go to the next viewport, and we're going to do the same thing. We can hit enter, and we're going to zoom, and we're going to go to extents. Okay, so we have our front view. And one last time, zoom. Oh, looks like I got a different command. Zoom. Extents. Okay, and we have our right side view over here. Okay, now once you've done that for the 3 of the 4 viewports, we're going to be at step 25, where we're going to center the 2D geometry for each port. And we're doing this somewhat eyeball at this point, and we're going to go through a process that will actually align them to each other. So I'm going to start with the right side view since it's active, and I use the center wheel on my press down the center wheel of my mouse for pan, and you can use the scroll to zoom in. So this particular one, we don't really want it centered. You want to avoid in general putting anything right above where the parts list would be, or right below where the revision block is going to be. As the drawing is revised, this will get longer, and if this has multiple parts, this could be a premium space that you need for future revisions. Okay, so we're going to pan. And if they're not the same size, that's okay at this point. We just want to be able to see what we're working with. Okay. Each of your viewports should be in 2D wireframe. All right, our next step, we've now completed step 25, and now we will set the viewport and display scale factor. Now in the procedure, it has you make a scale of 1:1 for metric and 1:2 for metric for half scale. We're going to make a third one, which is a third scale, which I think works well with the size of this part and a V-size sheet. So we're going to go down. We have the top view currently active, and we're going to go down to the right where you see these numbers and a down arrow. That's the actual scale factor that that view is currently zoomed at. Okay, so we're going to open that window, and we're actually going to make scales that are for metric. These are all for standard. So we're going to hit the custom bar, and we're going to add to the list, and we're going to call this 1:1 mm for metric, for millimeters. And our paper units are going to be 1, and our drawing units are going to be 25.4. They are 25.4 millimeters in 1 inch. So that's where that number comes from. We hit OK. Now let's select OK, and let's see what it does to that view if we now pull down on the arrow and select 1:1 in metric. Okay, so that's probably too big for anything we're going to dimension. There won't be room for the dimensions to fit around, so we know that's not going to work. But we might use it for another drawing. So now we're going to go back here, and we're going to make another custom scale, and we're going to select add. We're going to call this 1:2. It's a half scale in metric, in millimeters. And it's going to be half a paper unit is the equivalent of 25.4. So 0.5 is equivalent of this. So it's going to be half that scale. Hit OK. And we'll select OK. And we'll do the same exercise of that same view. Now let's move to half scale in metric. That's better, but I still suspect we won't have enough room for dimensions. So the example was at an odd scale, which is 3:4. I'm not sure how that was derived at. I think the scale that's appropriate for this drawing and this size and the number of dimensions, 1/3 scale would work well. So we're going to do this just one more time. We're going to go to custom. We're going to add. It's going to be called 1:3 or 1/3 millimeters. And you're going to put 0.33333. You can go on for infinity if you want. 25.4. All right, so 1/3 of a unit is going to be 1 inch. We'll hit OK. And OK. Now let's apply that new scale that we just added to that view. And then we're going to go to each viewport, and we're going to do likewise. Okay, so now all 3 views are scaled the same size, provided we don't change this, and you can accidentally change it by spinning the thumb wheel. But they aren't aligned with each other, and you have to plan your spacing now. So the spacing between here, the top view, and the front view should be the same as the spacing between the front view and the side view. Now I'm going to eyeball it. I suggest you actually offset some lines and get it accurate. But for the sake of expediency, I'm not going to go through that. I'm trying to show you the principles you need to develop your drawing. So I'm going to move this view pretty far to the left, and then I'm going to move the front view a little bit to the right, and then that way we can space our top view. It's relatively close to the same spacing between the drawings, okay? Drawing views. Okay, now we're going to go through an alignment procedure. So we've just finished 26A and 27, and now we're going to move on to 28. Now 28, to do the alignment, there's a typed in command. Apparently there's not an icon for it. So you have to type in mv setup. Okay. And we're going to have we're going to have options here. We're going to use align, and we're going to first align vertically between the left edge of the front view and the left edge of the top view. Okay, so we'll enter in that command again, and we're going to align horizontally between the very bottom of the front view and the very bottom of the right side view. And we're done. Okay, so those should be aligned so they're projected correctly. The next thing is we're going to lock all these viewports so we don't accidentally move stuff around. Okay, so in viewport right side, you need to have that highlighted, and you go down and select the padlock icon at the bottom of the screen. Go to the next view, we're going to select the padlock button again. And then the top view, again, once again, the padlock. So those are all locked. We're leaving the fourth viewport alone. And now we're going to do some settings to set some scales of different aspects. So right now you notice you don't see any hidden lines, and that is because the scale of the dashes are too big. So the first step is to type PSLT scale, and we're going to put in a factor of 1. Okay, the next thing is we're going to type in LTS, which sets the line weight. And we're going to put in 0.5. And you should see some of your lines go from solid to hidden line format. And it should be only where they are obscured in that particular view. So we should see our holes and the bore and whatever would be a hidden line. If you don't see that, typing REA, which is a regenerate all, and it refreshes the view. Okay, the next step is going to be to explode. You want to make sure we're exploding these views into separate entities so we can move different elements on different layers. You want to make sure that your views are positioned where you want them, because then after you do the explode, they are now separate entities and won't move together. So you need to be careful. So we're going to do step 32. We're going to type the letter X, implode. Just starts with an X. And we need to select the items we're going to explode. Should have 3 views, 3 items. We hit enter, and we're going to do global. So accept that, and then it asks you some options. We're going to do all. We're going to do it by layer, color, line weight. So we're going to put it in line weight, LW, and hit enter. And then it asks you the new line weight, what designates it. And we're going to do that by layer, which should be the default. Okay. So now, if we go and select on our views, they're individual entities and they've all been moved to layer 0. So now we go through a process of sorting the information onto the proper layer, and it'll take on the line weight of the layer they're moved to. Okay, so let's start with the front view. We basically have everything except for the 2 hidden lines for the holes going through the plate. So I'm going to select from left to right, which anything that crosses the marquee box will be selected, but And be careful not to select the hidden lines that are associated with the holes. Okay, so that should be everything. Sometimes you want to zoom in and double check. And you get the corners again. Looks like I got it all, except for this. Okay, and we're going to change the layer of that information to the profile invisible lines. Now I used to do this and I would actually make the layer invisible that I'm moving things to so I could be sure that that information went, but okay, so now we're going to select our 2 hidden lines, or 4 hidden lines, and we're going to move those to the hidden line layer, and they should turn magenta when you do that, because that'll be a visual cue that they're on the correct layer. Alright, let's move on to the right side view and do the same thing. I'm going to move, I'm going to try to move everything except for the hidden lines. Again, if you go from bottom right to upper left, anything that crosses the marquee box is highlighted. If you go from top to bottom, it has to be completely enveloped by the marquee box to be selected. Okay, we're going to move all that stuff to profile visible lines. And now we will move our hidden lines to the hidden line layer. Alright. All we're left with is this top view. A little more tricky to select. We've got that information that's solid. We have this line. We have the arc. We have the rib here, or web, if you want to call it that. And we have everything up to there. We have the one line segment. Okay, looks like I have everything. And I'm going to move all that to the profile invisible lines. And now we're going to go back and select what's a hidden line. So it should be everything that this crosses. And everything that crosses is going to go to the hidden line layer. Okay, once you've finished this, I would zoom in, make sure you didn't miss anything. Because they think they are things that will rear their ugly heads later. We finished up to 33. Now it's saying to add center lines to cylindrical features in each viewport. Make sure your center lines layer is active. So we're going to move to center line layer. And that way any center line we make is going to be lime green here. Now there's a center line command that allows you to generate an automatic center line between 2 other lines. One flaw with it is we need to use the lengthen command, and it won't allow you to do that. to have the center line go beyond. So we're going to manually draw these, but if we're in the correct layer, it should default to a line type that's a center line. So we're going to go from, we're going to do a line from endpoint to endpoint, and that'll give us something to select on for center of this hole. And then we can simply come back and delete that construction line. Come back and do the same thing here. So I drew a line from either end, defining where the center is going to be, and I'm looking for now midpoints. So I'm going to disable endpoint because it's conflicting, and I'm going to go from midpoint to midpoint. And after I have those created, I can now go back and delete my construction lines. Now we're going to go to the front view, and we're going to do more or less the same thing. Midpoint to midpoint. And now we'll go to the top view. And we can go from the midpoint of the back to the midpoint of the front. And in the front view, I'm going to try a center mark. I'm going to just apply it to the center hole. Okay. And then we're going to use center lines to radiate out. Okay, so now we're going to go back and use this modify lengthen, and we're going to use delta, which is DE is the abbreviation, delta, and we want to extend out 6 millimeters. Of 6 millimeters, and then we pick on the things we want to extend by 6 millimeters. Our circles as well. Okay, so you're pretty well set up. It looks like we might need to change the line scaling a little bit. We had it set up for half a unit. So it's looking like to me that the because we went with a 1/3 scale, we need to go back and change that. So I ended up having to do an LTS of 0.125 to have our spacing look correct. Now, I would encourage you to scrutinize that, and it should be matching the standard. And now we just have to do step number 36, which we're going to go and we're going to unfreeze the model. And then we need to set the scale in that view port to match the others. So it's going to be 1/3 scale, and we'll want to move it kind of over so that you've got some room for your revision block. And you should be in pretty good shape at that point. Again, for the assignment, you need it to be fully dimensioned. You need your title block to be correct. The default is an inch. You need to change that to metric. Also, adjust the tolerances so that it appears like it should. But yes, you need to state that this drawing is in millimeters. And make sure you pay attention to your drafting standards and do the best you can to have nice spacing. I'm going to be looking for that. Please save your PDF off in black and white, but I'm going to be looking at very closely at the drafting rules if you how you applied them. All right, hope this helps, and I'll see you online.